So instead of Shakespeare,
Yeah.
we're doing it through a Meek Mill lyric. We're doing it through a Common lyric, but it's the same skill. I don't care how we get to that final resting place. Can you give me the theme?
Right.
I don't care if you did it through Shakespeare. I don't care if you did it through a Burna Boy track. If you have the skill, the capacity, you can do it forever.
Yeah. This is another long overdue one, man. Actually, we should have a series. It's like not like lost tapes, but like late tapes. So this would be part of the late tape series. David, thank you for your time and for your patience in scheduling and finally getting here on Hip Hop Could Save America to join me on the show. Please, if you would, I could read your bio, but sometimes it's changed since the last time we wrote it because we do so many things. So if you would, just take a minute to introduce yourself to the world the way you like to be perceived in relation to why we're talking today, man.
Well, first, I got to say it's an honor to finally be on the podcast. To all the listeners, you probably were like me years ago, found out about Manny and the great platform, and then heard so many great people. And now, full circle moment, I'm on the podcast. But to those who know and to those that are hearing me for the first time, I am the beloved one, David Spellmon. I am a hip hop educator, and I like to tell people that means I am an unorthodox educator. Mm-hmm. I was never been a traditionally trained teacher, but I wrote a curriculum, and I'm all about destigmatizing hip hop for educational consumption.
I love it. Destigmatizing. And thank you for the kind words, by the way. Yeah, I came across your book very early. So the book is Just Like Music, Social Emotional Learning Inspired by Hip Hop. And it was in the early days of me gathering resources because there were people doing this work and I was coming across them. And then I felt compelled to be the one who kind of tells the stories, as I often say, because y'all out there doing this work and destigmatizing takes a lot of work. Like it's a tough racket that you don't often have the time to promote yourselves or market yourselves or tell your own story. So early on we've talked like Dr. Bettina Love and of course the Chris Emdens of the world, Dr. Emden. Mm-hmm. But your book came across pretty early too. And I started realizing the connection of, hip hop and the educational spaces, particularly in your case, the idea of the social emotional learning, which again was a phrase that if you're outside of the academic circles, you don't necessarily, or, youth development, or, if you're just a regular person, a parent, person, that idea of social emotional learning is something we know of, but it's ethereal. And not only did you break it down in terms of sort of how it works when you're teaching youth or working with youth, but specifically in the education sector, but then through hip hop. Can you give someone who doesn't, like say, understand that terminology from a, therapeutic sense, what social and emotional learning is, why you've tied it into the education space and hip hop in your admittedly unorthodox way?
Man, absolutely. And it's crazy because to your point, when people hear the term social emotional learning, they look befuddled. It's like, oh, I've never heard of this before. But we say emotional intelligence is paramount. Right. And basically, it's the same thing. Emotional intelligence for adults is the same thing as social and emotional learning for kids. And really, even saying they're two different things, they're really one and the same. Mm. But with that saying, how I bridge it with hip hop. Now, everybody who's been tapped into Hip Hop Can Save America, this is not going to be any new information. We know hip hop started with the DJ. Without the DJ, there's no hip hop. You got the MC, you got graffiti, and you got B-boys, B-girls, breakdancing. Those are the original four elements. That less often fifth element is knowledge of self. Any definition of social emotional learning, any definition of emotional intelligence, you take a look at it. That is knowledge of self. Mm. So what I'm doing through these lyrics is teaching kids knowledge of self through the hip hop culture.
Yeah. And the book, and again, the book's been out for a minute, but it's still as relevant today as it was when it first dropped. So the book does that. It basically, it's a sort of a lyrical analysis and again, connecting these dots, right? And using lyrics, not just from like the songs that most people, might point to, the regular, oh yeah, of course. And then there's this line of like, but you actually went a little bit deeper, not only type of artist, but also locale, like kind of, I'm looking at it from an interesting perspective. Why the songs you picked, why the lyrical selections you picked, and give an example of this kind of connecting the dots for folks.
Absolutely. So people who know me, of course, many people is like, oh, I like this guy, David Spellmon. Let me learn more about him. My story actually started in London, England. Both my parents were in the service in East London, to be exact, Stratford. Mm-hmm. That, for the first 7 years of my life, just those influences. The first place I moved to in the States was Philadelphia, which is why the first chapter is Philadelphia. Went all the way across the country to San Francisco. So the Bay Area, moved to Guam. It's a U.S. territory, heavy Asian influence, Filipino, all that good stuff. Then settled in North Carolina. So
That's like a real four
with that being
corners
said,
kind of like
oh
that's
yeah,
a nomadic existence.
all those influences really helped me, and of course with hip hop being my culture. And I have to, be fair. Up north, East Coast bias. Favorite group of all time is a Tribe Called Quest. My favorite rapper, singular, would have to be Fab. So which is why Brooklyn is represented 3 times in the curriculum.
Fair enough.
But one example that I give is my favorite chapter that is near and dear to my heart. So the Harlem chapter is a track called Beloved by Styles P and Dave East. A lot of people don't know Styles' first name is David.
Right.
The opening line is, the meaning of the name David is beloved or friend. So with that, I break it down to talk about how I learned that at 31 years of age. That's a self-awareness, which is one of the competencies of social and emotional learning. Self-awareness is one of the things that we focus on. So through that song, it just kind of gave me, a new sense of, okay, my name, I know I was named after my father,
right,
but look at how my name has value. And the activity that I chose to use for that chapter is kids using a free online assessment where they get to find out their top strengths. So not like physical strength, but those innate strengths. Once again, knowledge of self. What do you innately bring to this world, young person? So by doing that chapter, hearing that track, we get to boost them up inside out, so to speak. So that's just one example from the book, and that's the Harlem chapter.
That's dope. And again, this is, like you said, this is part of a curriculum, and you're like me, a little bit of, we acknowledge the fact that, I'm not a tradition. I didn't come up through traditional academic, steps. And again, my dad, distinguished professor of sociology, all praise due to his brilliance and his academic prowess. And, I learned a lot through osmosis, just like you did from learning, from moving around the country. You learn so much from so many different people. And again, my dad being a sociologist, he's like, listen, I could teach you a book, but the person going to teach you better. So I already learned, early on, like it's having the influences directly, integrated into your life is where you actually learn a lot better than necessarily, through the traditional books. But how did you get into the lane of creating something that ends up being curriculum, or looking at the stuff we're talking about here, lyrics, and how it affects young people, and how you could be swayed by it in a positive way, and to turn that into something that could be taught? Where did your meandering path lead to you making a curriculum?
And I gotta big you up again. Of course, y'all know Manny Faces. The boy is a genius. He's great. But I always appreciate listening to an episode where you do reference that. For people who are also in education that are not traditional teachers, you are still an educator, whether you're a parent, whether you're an uncle or aunt, whatever. You've helped a friend do something. You've given them knowledge as a teacher would do. So I always appreciate you saying, I'm not a traditional teacher, but that does not make you an educator.
Damn right.
But
that's right. Yeah.
For me,
we're talking about learned experience. We're talking about hip hop. We're talking about each one teach one. We're talking about ancient, like humanity ways of passing down information. It wasn't always like, look at my chalkboard, young person. You know what I mean? Like, of course. Yeah.
Nah, but to answer the question, it started way back when, early 90s. Of course, the purists will agree. Midnight Marauders, A Tribe Called Quest. It was the interlude after a war tour. I want to say maybe track 3 or 4, but we know they have the lady in like the elevator music playing. And this is the first time that I learned something from hip hop. The young lady said, 7 times out of 10, we listen to our music at night. Thus spawned the title of this programming. The word maraud means to loot. In this case, we loose for ears. Midnight Maraud. To this day, I've never been in the classroom where they taught the definition of marauders. I learned that from A Tribe Called Quest.
I've never heard that word. I've never heard marauders. Exactly. 100%.
So that right there, to my young mind, little did I know I would be doing what I'm doing now. Right. But I never forgot the meaning of the word marauders because of a hip hop album.
Yeah.
So for me, that was the genesis of what everything else is built upon. Right. But just going through my travels, I do work in the education system. I'm more in the behavior roles. I went to college and got my degree in psychology. Okay. So it started out in mental health. So community mental health, working with families and students, in wherever I was at.
Right.
that's when I learned that there is a disparity between the curriculum or the activities that we want to give young people and the progress. As an adult, I'm like, man, I wouldn't want to do these sessions with somebody giving me this bullshit. Like
Right.
it wasn't going to work for me. So
Right.
I thought about it. And of course, it's not just me. I stand on the shoulders of many great individuals. And a lot of my mentors would hear me complain about the work or what I had to do to kind of boost these kids up.
Right.
So they challenged me. Instead of complaining, why don't you create something?
Mm.
And of course, hip hop was second nature. I was always using lyrics to boost them up. It
Right.
just wasn't in curriculum form because, once again, wasn't a traditionally trained teacher.
Right.
So I had to learn these things through my travels. So from community mental health, it transitioned to the K-12. And then I just started learning. Of course, I'm working with the perceived bad students. And no, students are not bad. They're seeking connection because when you connect with students, you know what? Their grades improve. You know what? They show up. There's no what's the word I'm looking for? Truancy
Right.
issues.
Right.
If I like my teacher, if I like my
I
school,
won't go.
I'm showing up every
Right.
day,
That's right.
you know. So I'm just using the tenets of hip hop, and even going back, I referenced the four elements, but the original pillars: peace, love, unity, and having fun. If that was in every classroom in America,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have some of the issues we have in K-12 schools.
Right.
So I'm simply just doing what we always done.
Right.
Use our culture to bring people in.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that translating it to those spaces because we do it, or, hip hop heads, do it inherently. I learned this again years ago, learned this from talking to Bettina Love and finding out that she's like, yeah, we try to bring this stuff into schools and they're like, no, that we're not going to do rap in the school, hip hop. And I'm like, no, we're talking about social emotional intelligence. We're talking about improvisational skills. And you just got to translate it to the terminology
Yeah.
that they use. And then you realize that it's a brilliant, beautiful tool. And it's dope that you kind of just said, well, if I'm going to go do this thing, then I'm going to bring my culture with me. And so often when you go through the traditional routes, the culture's squeezed out of you, right? At every step.
Absolutely.
Every step, especially education, especially Black men. We've heard this talked about. Dr. Emden's talked about this. The culture gets pushed away because it's inherently seen as, not helpful or negative and all these, possible stereotypes. But actually that's where the strength is. The strength and the power is in those connections in that culture. So to be able to do it this way, sort of outside of the traditional system, and remix it a little bit instead of having to go through the industry, you know what I mean? Like a mixtape. Like that's why I look at your book like it's a curriculum, but it's not like, but now I will ask though, has it been used in traditional public school systems, and how has it have you seen that integrated sort of we use one in praxis, we use one of their words.
All right. And this is the thing, we're still working to get there. We have done it in small sections, but the thing that's unique about my curriculum, what I would advocate for all my hip hop educators, this is the cheat code.
Okay.
If anything you glean from this interview, whatever you're doing, if you can tie it to the standards,
right,
the educational ears will prop up. Right. So I'm saying I'm doing hip hop
to make it their structure, but you still got,
exactly.
our vibe.
Exactly. So I embed English language arts standards into the work that I'm doing, because when they read the chapter, the first question I ask them is, what is the theme? So what is the theme of Philadelphia, Toronto, Chicago, Lagos, Nigeria? Right. Once they can decipher what the theme is, that's critical thinking. That's reading comprehension. That's in the standards that they're supposed to be doing. Right. So instead of Othello, Shakespeare, right, we're doing it through a Meek Mill lyric. We're doing it through a Common lyric, but it's the same skill. In my mind, I don't care how we get to that final resting place. Oh, can you comprehend? Can you give me the theme? Right. I don't care if you did it through Shakespeare. I don't care if you did it through a Burna Boy track. If you have the skill, the capacity, you can do it forever. Yeah. And that's the thing. You have to give them that hook, an education. Oh, you got to hook the kids. It's not really hooking them. It's just using their culture and their interests. So big up Zaretta Hammond, because I also stand on her shoulders, culturally responsive teaching. And that's really what I've done.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so working to get it into schools, you've done it in smaller settings, done it in workshops. Again, for someone, lay person, what do you see change in a young person who isn't that connected, but then you make these connections through this, process that you've developed? What changes? What's the aha moment and that you can say, oh, this is working. I've seen this work.
So the answer to this question is why I continue to do what I'm doing.
Mm.
So first, I'm gonna give the answer from the ivory tower standpoint.
Right.
What I'm doing, merging hip hop with social and emotional learning, is neuroplasticity. I'm creating new brain synapses, and I said that for the highbrow people.
Right.
Let me break it down.
Right.
I've had students come up to me and say, Mr. Spell, now when I hear Meek Mill's Dreams and Nightmares, I think about goal setting. So I
Okay.
take that line from the intro. I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this, so I had to grind like that to shine like this. And in the chapter, I talk about Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In habit 2, he talks about beginning with the end in mind through 2 creations. You have the first creation, which is that mental creation, which is praying. I'm praying for this goal I want to accomplish.
Right.
Then the second creation is the physical manifestation. Right. And we all know when you're on your grind, late nights, early mornings. So what Meek said in one bar, right. Mr. Covey, Dr. Covey, spent an entire chapter on it. Right. So when people say hip hop doesn't add value, I just simply laugh. But that's just one instance of a kid using the Meek Mill, the intro, to talk about goal setting, because then we have the young people create a vision board. So now we're changing their perspective. Yeah, this song talked about everything, but at the end of the day, what's the takeaway? Oh, Meek Mill was talking about goal setting. He talked about working hard to get to that place he wanted to be at. Oh, I love Meek Mill, but you can do it too, young person. Right. What are the goals that you have for yourself? Right. So your culture doesn't have to be looked at as, oh, we can't allow that here in this classroom, in this schoolhouse. No, I'm just showing people, look at the value hip hop has.
Yeah. Tell me about where you've gone, where this has brought you. Because I saw you. I was actually very happy to because again, long overdue. I know, but I got the chance to see you present. We were at University of UNC Charlotte. Shouts to our good friends there. Shouts to Ashley Tate, who I've had on the show, and it's a wonderful conference. To the Beach Hall, the first annual hip hop symposium at UNC Charlotte. I was a keynote speaker. You were a presenter. Of course, I stayed for all the presentations because I'm a lifelong learner at this stuff. You presented. It was a very compelling and interactive session. And in there, you said you've gone to a lot of places and talked to a lot of things. Tell me about some of the places this work has brought you and some of the things you've seen along the way.
Well, of course, and big up Professor Tate, Mark Sanders over there at UNCC. That's home team because I do currently live in Charlotte, but I want to big up Dr. Tasha Iglesias, who was a former guest you've had on here. She was the first person to give me the opportunity to speak about this work on a global stage. Right. So that was all the way in 2020. Yep. So from there, man, I've been to San Francisco.
Our hip hop global conference, hip hop education, whatever. I was hosting at the time. Now I'm part of the organization.
And that's how I met you. So yeah. Right. So but yeah, San Francisco, 826 Valencia is a nonprofit. And the unique thing about them is they have students at the end of that whole session create a poetry book, which I had the honor of writing the foreword because of the work I was doing with them. Yeah. I've been University Preparatory Charter School for Boys, Rochester, New York. I have some school districts that I work with in Illinois. I really touch both sides of the country, but then even taking it further. So shout out Fidel and True School in Milwaukee. Me and him had the opportunity to speak to students in Uganda. So man, this work really does touch the planet. Right. And I know you always say, hip hop can save America, but you also have the domain for hip hop can save the world. Right. So it really is the truth in the different sects of hip hop. Because even in the book, I use a track by WizKid, Afrobeat. Right. I use a UK artist, Dave, featuring Burna Boy. Right. So it's not just, traditional US hip hop. Hip hop really can save the world because the way people utilize it, it just fills their cup. And like I've been saying, these social and emotional learning skills and tactics, and they can be found through all genres of music. But of course, hip hop is my culture. And I know the stigma. You have the violence, you have the misogyny, the drug reference. Cool. I'm not going to say that's not there. You can listen to a lot of tracks, but you're not talking about the way hip hop can boost up self-confidence, the way hip hop talks about conflict resolution, self-efficacy. You don't want to highlight those things, but that's why me and the tribe, that's what we're here for. Right.
Right. Indeed. And we talk about this often. Again, this may be the first time someone's, checking in with us and hearing this for the first time. So we'll remind them, or we'll let them know and remind others that even in what might be termed, negative, or some aspect of lyricism, or sometimes you might even be hesitant to call it lyricism. I understand, but there are lessons in all of that. There are lessons in what children or young people are getting from their music, that if we just kind of tune out the if we look at it through a non-rose colored glass, whatever the opposite of a rose colored glass is, and we just negative, we're going to miss opportunities to engage with our kids. Even Meek Mill, if you put the Dreams and Nightmares on for someone who's not familiar with hip hop, they may be a teacher, they may mean well, they may love kids, but they are not from hip hop, they don't understand rap, and they hear that, and that could be rather off-putting to some people. But not only is it, but again, the lessons can be gleaned from those words and the way what they actually mean, and how young people, more importantly, relate to them. I always make the analogy that if my kids now are listening, we always, old heads will be, we used to rap about selling drugs. Now all these kids rap about is taking drugs. Like the former was better. Like, we're celebrating that one. Like, but the implication is that these kids are weak. Their lives are easy now. We've heard it said in the music industry that hip hop, that rap doesn't have the oomph it once did because the struggle's not there anymore, because it's not as bad as it was. And I would counter and I would say, well, if you look at the mental health deterioration since pandemic of these young people, I don't know if it was any better or worse in the 80s, or, where all this like supposedly hard Scrabble life was being represented in rap music. So if they're rapping about, if you hear artists talking about self-medicating or having, depression or really deranged thoughts, and our kids are tuned into that, I don't like it. I don't think it's necessarily, hip hop's best form of literature, you know what I mean? But there's a connection that's there between the young people and what they're hearing. NBA Youngboy, for example, which a lot of folks won't mess with. It was just a great piece in Anscape. David something, I forget his name. I just highlighted it in my newsletter. By the way, anyone listening, please subscribe to the newsletter. We share stories like this. We share work like David's. But there was a story about what people get wrong about NBA Youngboy, and it really broke down why. Forget what you think or what you like or if you care. The fact that young men, especially across, are losing their minds connecting to this dude and his music. Why? The lessons are there. And I thought the piece did a really good job of spelling that out. And that's what you're saying. You're saying that the stigmatization is so detrimental because you're holding back all the blessings that the work like what you're doing can bring out of our young people, and by default, by extension, society. Yes, you'd agree. Of course you'd agree, but you know what I'm saying.
No, and I got to give you my analogy as well, because I've been saying this for years. So when I look at the work that not just myself, but so many great individuals are doing in this space, I frame it like, nutrition. If I love burgers and I go to a burger spot and let's say I hate lettuce, hey, let me get that burger without the lettuce. Right. I don't say all burgers are bad. All burgers are terrible. Right. This is the worst thing ever. Right. No, I simply take the lettuce off. Right. And even with some of those harder to talk about subjects, and I know we're in the traditional K-12 space, but man, when I'm doing community work, I let the kids curse. I'm not tripping off of them cursing. Right. That's the way they know how to express themselves. Right. But I can't have every word be profanity. But there's so many lessons you can take away from the genre of hip hop, not to just say, okay, because they talked about some violence, the entire genre of hip hop is negative. Right. So I could never let anybody say that.
I say we can't throw away the hip hop baby with the mumble rap bathwater. Yeah. That's all I'm saying. That's all I say. No, that's dope. And I appreciate it. And I think it just bears repeating. It really bears repeating. There is so much. And again, you talked about misogyny. Absolutely. Because, I think the way a lot of us look at it is this is a reflection of society. And if society is still pretty crappy, then, some of the output's going to be reflective of that, But I also think that within the aspects of unity that can be found in hip hop culture, not just the music, but, in us talking and in the circles that we're in and you working with these communities and getting these young people to change their minds, that we can also change those minds about those negative behaviors, those societal behaviors, in a way that I think traditional methods have failed, because we still have misogyny. So whatever they try to do, it hasn't worked. You know what I mean? And they couldn't teach these kids, but hip hop can. And they couldn't get to these kids in a mental health setting, but hip hop can. So maybe if we focus the hip hop methodology, into solving these problems like with intent, you can actually solve the problem. So it's not that there's so much misogyny in hip hop, there's misogyny in the world. Hip hop might be able to solve that
Yeah,
problem. And I think that the people who are most equipped will be women, by the way, that have a hip hop, that come from hip hop.
agreed.
These are
No,
my
I'm
theories.
glad you said that
Yeah.
because, everybody talks about the problems that are within hip hop. And I'm like, you know what? Hip hop didn't create misogyny.
Mm-hmm.
There was violence way before hip hop was
Mm-hmm.
started.
Mm-hmm.
We're saying hip hop 50, a couple years ago. So violence only started 50 something years ago. Let's
Misogyny
be for
just
real.
in
Let's be,
in the
come
80s, that's
on.
where it really blossomed. Right. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, like I said, these are societal problems. What I think hip hop does is not only does it absorb them and reflect them, which it does, and there's no stopping it, and there's no we can't lament it. Like it's supposed to do that. It's supposed
Mm,
to do that. It's supposed to do. It's supposed to reflect it. But if it can also help improve society, then the reflections will start to reflect that. So yeah, I think we have the solution, not the problem. But we're preaching to each other's
absolutely.
choir. For those who are listening and just tuned in, again, David Spellmon, the author of Just Like Music, Social Emotional Learning, Inspired by Hip Hop. The book still available. Get it in your collections. Obviously for educators, obviously for anyone, I guess, in charge of youth. Like sometimes there's youth programs and nonprofits. I suppose this would be great for nonprofit leaders as well, and even parents. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say all of it, and I'm thank you for allowing me to even say this part. Not just for schools.
Right.
I have standards in there because kids should be in
Yeah.
school. High school students should be in school. But I work with a lot of mentor organizations,
Mm-hmm.
nonprofits, Department of Juvenile Justice. But to your point, anybody who's working with young, I would say eighth grade on up, and even some young adults. I've done some stuff with colleges and
Right.
universities as far as programming,
Right.
because every chapter is essentially a workshop.
Right.
But anybody who's working with secondary students, young adults, this book should be on your bookshelf because it just has an engaging way of uplifting those skills that we say kids want.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. You have to put the time in. You can't just say, oh, these kids don't have the same values if they've never been taught.
Right.
And what I'm saying is, who's a great teacher? Hip hop, because it taught us many things prior to today. And it's going to continue to teach us as we move forward.
Yeah. And I think because the industry, because capitalism, because it was much more apparent. Like you said, you listen to a song, you learned a thing, like a fact, like a specific. I use mine is KRS One's "You Must Learn," where I learned about all these brilliant Black inventors and innovators throughout American history that you didn't really hear much about. That representation matters. Those factoids matter. And yeah, okay, we don't get a lot of that in the music today that's put out to the masses. Not that obviously it doesn't exist. You can go find it. So it can
Yeah.
feel like these lessons are far and few in between. I often argue that, yeah, maybe we don't get those factoid. We don't learn what marauders means, but because the guy who learned what marauders means is now a teacher, you know what I mean, or an educator, or in the spaces, we can translate that information down to the folk, but we can also give them all the other lessons that hip hop has taught us along the way, including, being resilient enough to find our way into the education space and teach and make curriculum, even though that's not what we were here to do. You know what I mean?
Absolutely not. Amen to that,
Yeah,
brother.
so
Amen to that.
yeah. All right. Tell me, as we start to get through this, what are you working on now? Is it, obviously going around doing the workshops? What are you looking to get more opportunities to do for folks who are, tuned in, who may say, oh, this might be good for my organization or whatever? Where do you want to be? What are you trying to do? And what are you looking for collaboration wise with, other organizations to keep, or maybe you just want to take a year off? I don't know. You tell me.
Now, like you can't take no days off. That's
Mhm.
for one thing.
Mhm.
But keeping it with the Tribe Called Quest, man, just pushing it along.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is getting with the organization and some researchers to get some of that good quantitative data. So pilot programs where we can say, okay, this group of students did through week 1 all the way through week 17.
Yeah.
We've seen some improvements in grades. We see some suspensions or some discipline issues decrease. You know what? Correlation. Maybe it's because of Just Like Music curriculum. So that's one of the biggest things that I'm working on, but I'm always constantly working with different organizations.
Yeah.
Exposure leads to expansion. So anybody whose 2 ears are tapped into this podcast episode, positivearchersolutions.com, positivearcher@gmail.com. Reach out because I'm always looking to collaborate with like-minded individuals. If you feel like you're not reaching your youth, efficiently, effectively, I might have a solution, which hence is why the name of the company is Positive Archer Solutions.
Right.
I'm a Sagittarius. I bring that good energy, and I feel like I have some solutions for some of the issues plaguing our youth
Yeah.
through hip hop. So I'm constantly working with different organizations, and coming up in February, I'll be going to the National Mentor Summit.
Mm.
And that's going to be a new thing because just that mentor space, what I'm hearing from a lot of organizations across the country is, we have two out of the three. We have the youth, we have the location, we have the space to engage with them.
Mm.
We don't have good programming.
Okay.
Like mentoring is not taking you out to the basketball court shooting.
Right.
That's not real mentoring.
Okay.
How am I talking about, going back to the Meek Mill, your goal setting? How am I talking about the way you handle conflicts? If you feel bad, what are your coping skills? Like, that's true mentorship. Really, once again, inside out approach and just boosting up a young person to have them acquire that knowledge of self.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned that you focus on that element a lot. And of course, there's other elements. I'm just curious. This is, an aside. Now you got all the promo stuff, and I hope people do take you up on that and follow you and get more information about what you're doing and bring them into whatever you might be doing. Were you a practitioner of any of the other arts?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
So my element was like breakdancing.
Okay.
Like top rocking. That was what I do. I mean, I still dance. Like I do, some Afrobeat, some dancehall reggae, even dance some salsa, merengue, bachata.
Okay.
So dancing has always been a part of my DNA. So of course, when it came to the elements, it was more b-boy for me.
That's what's up. Okay. Yeah. Cause you don't have to be, a practitioner of necessarily the arts. You can be part of the culture without it, but it's nice and it's interesting. You must have had a great time at at UNC at the To the Beach show. It was very dance focused, as it should be. Dance gets relegated to the back sometimes, and then we just got all we could talk about is the Olympics, and then it's like no, there's so much more.
No.
There's so many more things happening besides the Olympics. And that was mostly fine. But real quick, just tell. I'm glad you said this is unplanned, but how the dance element of hip hop ties in to Aisha Upchurch, who I'm sure talks about dance as liberation, dance as joy, and all the things that are necessary. The movement, the body, that necessity to move. That movement is freedom. Like, explain your connection to dance and hip hop.
Honestly, this is just full transparency. I don't think I've ever said this on wax, but when I was a youth, like when I would get in trouble, when you're young, you're flailing your body around, right. And it really became a coping mechanism. Like when I felt upset or when I felt angry, I would just start moving in different ways. And then you kind of be like, oh, you grooving. Or if you were playing some kind of music, you kind of had a bop, and I might have been upset.
Right.
Now I'm no longer upset because the way that music affected my ears and went down to my bones, and now my legs is moving in ways I didn't think they could move. Right. So really, dance was always like a coping mechanism because it got my mind off of an unpleasant feeling. And not just saying I was depressed or I was hurt, but if I was angry and I didn't want to steal off on somebody, let me go ahead and work on my move, or let me not yell at my parents because I know it's not going to end in a good result either. Right. So let me do something like to take this energy and convert it in a more positive way. Yeah. So that's what dance has always done for me.
I love it. It's just another example of, and again, dance is universal. It's not hip hop. This is not exclusive to hip hop, but when you put them all together, you got music, you got lyrics, you extracting positive, reinforcement from lyrics, or you're just, getting out your frustrations, tying it into feeling some connection with somebody relates to me, and that's happening, but you're still moving on top of that. You have like now a sort of a double, like a superpower. Like you're getting two different methods of, regulation or self-regulation. I'm speaking, yes. I'm touching on, subjects I don't know enough about, but you know what I'm saying? Like that self-regulating, that that self-care in a way that without those things to do, it's all bottled in and it's all, detrimental, I guess, just by not letting it out. It's what we all got into this genre to do, to let it out in one way or the other, in one form of art or the other. And we don't have to be good. We don't have to be professional. We can just kind of do it. We don't need any tools. We don't need any, special training. You can just do it. That's sort of the beauty of hip hop.
Yeah, even if it's just a two-step, like 50 would say, same old two-step, just get it out. And I think to your point, with me just knowing, the things that I've learned in psychology, stress, that's not like that energy is not diverted.
Right.
it is detrimental to your body. Like you can
Right, right.
cause certain diseases
Physically.
if the stress
Right.
just stays in there. Yeah. So you have to do something with it, whether it's writing as an outlet,
Right.
dancing, like whatever it is, you got to do something with those unresolved and negative feelings. And this is like biological. This is not anything we're making up. This will really hurt you.
Absolutely.
That stress can kill you at the end of the day
Yeah.
if you're not doing anything to revert that energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, as we often say, as I often say anyway, this works, wonders for communities that have been traditionally, marginalized or under-resourced or underloved by the proverbial powers that be. And so it really does kind of do something to speed up the recovery process, speed up the, I want to say the leveling of the playing field, or, cliche statement, but it does a little bit more because these are tried and true methods that do tie into the culturally relevant idea. But you would agree, I'm asking, it's also universal. These things,
Yeah.
the places you've gone have not always been like one demographic, that right? It's a universal thing. So it may help certain communities because they've been, again, they I'd say need it the most in the sense that they've been, like I said, under resourced the longest and the worst. But it actually does help people across the board. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of times people are like, well, we don't have a majority black school district, so we can't have Mr. Spellmon coming to the. No, of course, like it's ridiculous.
Man, to that point, when we're talking about this whole concept of social and emotional learning, and I say it many times in workshops, professional development with educators, how many people could benefit from having more self-confidence?
Right.
You see a bunch of hands go up. Right. I said, do you think that's just a black and brown thing? How about dealing with conflicts appropriately?
Right.
It doesn't matter what your demographic is, what your socioeconomic, anybody who has a beating heart in their body. Right. I know we're dealing with aliens and we don't know what they got going on, but if you're on this planet right now, you could benefit from whether you want to call it social emotional learning, right, whether you want to call it emotional intelligence. Right. These are just tried and true skills that help somebody be successful. Because if you don't know how to interact with people that are different than you, you're just going to be with the same people, and that's not what the world is made of. You're going to have to interact with others.
You have to interact with others, and that requires social emotional intelligence, which this is the way to do it. And plus, I mean, if you're talking about kids, when we talk about hip hop, it's so ubiquitous. It's so part of the fabric of the culture. Not only here, but globally, that you could. Again, folks I've talked to for years, we still get pushback and be like, "You don't want hip hop in a school? Like, this is ridiculous. Hip hop's all in your school. It's all in your school." Yeah. So what are you doing? Like, why don't you just embrace it and work it? Ridiculous.
Let me drop a gem for the individuals who still may be naysayers that don't come from the hip hop culture. Right. And I said it during the workshop I did at UNCC. Hip hop is already in academia. Right. Anybody anybody with their doctoral degree did a thesis paper, that works cited page, guess what? You sample. Right. Guess where sampling came from? Hip hop culture. Right. So little did you know, you were already a practitioner of hip hop. Right. So hip hop is already embedded into so many just aspects of our culture day to day. So to deny it in the school where it could benefit those kids the most, and not just black kids, because it may be different now, but at one point, hip hop was the number one consumed genre in America. Right. Guess who's not the biggest population in America? Right. Black folks. Right. So somebody else is buying hip hop. Somebody's buying into the idea of hip hop. Right.
Yeah. You can make these connections all day. And I'm glad you do. Like I said, you've done it in the book, but you've done it in the work in the years since. I've seen you do it in the workshop. So I would highly suggest that folks who are in the academic / education space, again, nonprofits, like I said, I even think parents, people who aren't parents, but maybe artists, maybe you're a rap artist, maybe you're, connected to the culture in some way, and you're looking for ways that you can get this kind of, understanding about what either the music you make, the music you consume, the other aspects of the culture that aren't music, and kind of self-teach, or self-learn. Again, we're supposed to be life learners. We're supposed to be on TikTok, learn how to make macaroni salad. Like then buy the book and learn how to, get your mind right. Like it's okay to do that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
That's what's up. Well, listen, we covered everything. I think you got everything out. Again, February, say it again, the mentorship summit. Where's that going to be at?
Yeah, National Mentor Summit taking place in Washington, D.C., February 4th through the 6th. I believe you can still register. I mean, and that's the thing with mentor, that spans everything.
I love it.
Whether a parent can be a mentor, but just those dedicated organizations working with youth across the country. They're going to be convening, and I think it's going to be a dope conference.
Yeah.
Of course, yours truly is presenting, so getting the word out, but just having spaces where people can convene and learn from each other, it's always a big up.
Mentorship is another brilliant, interdisciplinary place that hip hop can live. It is an extension of what we see in the schools. I tend to be a little educator heavy on this show, but that's why I keep saying, no. You're nonprofit organizations. Y'all deal with youth. You don't have to be an educator. You don't have to be a teacher to get these lessons. You could be a parent. And again, your curriculum guide. Yeah, we say curriculum and it does seem education based, but now you're saying no, but the same principles, these same methods can be applied to mentorship. So who needs to be a mentor? There's parents, there's clergy, there's, again, nonprofits. There's, so many people that are in the position of trying to be a mentor, trying to learn how to, positively influence our youth. So take the lessons learned from, where you've applied it here, just like music, and come to these sessions and check out your work and hire you and do all the things.
Come on now. And I got to say this because The Alchemist is my favorite hip hop producer. And this is the thing. When I usually say it, they think about the book. No, nothing against the book.
Sure.
But in the first Infantry album, The Alchemist had, I want to say it was 2004. In one of his interludes, it talked about the alchemist being able to transform ordinary metals into gold.
Right.
If you're working with young people, if you are a parent, essentially you are an alchemist. That young person that you birth or that young person that's in your care, I'm not saying they're ordinary, but they should be gold because of your interaction with them. So essentially, we are all alchemists.
Say it again for the people in the back. These kids,
come on,
man.
Kids
won't know.
ALC.
We don't know.
ALC.
Oh, he's having a great year.
Yes.
And these kids won't know, man. These kids won't know what we don't teach them. So, and yeah, they're going to have their own hard-headed opinions about it too. They're going to be like, listen, Unc, you know what I mean? And we're like, well, all right, I'll be Unc, but we're going to meet halfway and let's see where we can,
absolutely,
where we can, have these common grounds. I've tried it. It hasn't failed me yet. You do it all the time with young people. All of our colleagues do it. So this isn't, we're not making things up, folks.
Yeah.
So I appreciate it, man. Mentorship. I'm glad you called attention to that new, for me anyway, like we don't touch upon that as a specific kind of interdisciplinary area of focus, mentorship through hip hop. I love it. It's inherent in all the other, places that we, mental health therapy, education, guidance and all that stuff. But mentorship, man, I'm glad you're going to be there and they're going to learn that day. So,
oh yeah, they're gonna get a treat. They in for a treat.
Yes, indeed. David, thank you so much again for your time. I appreciate your patience. Like I say, divine timing. I think that whoever needs to hear this will, and we can come back and we can do this anytime. Invitation stays open, and I hope we cross paths again soon in person as well.
Absolutely, man. Once again, it's an honor to be on Hip Hop Can Save America because I've been an avid listener for the past 4 or 5 years. So this is just a surreal experience for me, even being on the airways, putting all this information on wax. So I appreciate you and just your movement, man, because everybody knows the book, go get the book as well from you, but just all the great work that you've done, bringing attention to the culture and the ways that it can affect America in a positive way in the world. So big up to you as well, Manny.
I appreciate appreciation. And again, your book, Early Way, like it's really a full circle because these were the ideas that I was coming across. I didn't invent this stuff. I'm just a guy that, thinks they're important and that thinks, your work is important. So full circle for me as well. Thank you for coming on and we'll kick it some other time soon. Anytime.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, my friend.
Many faces.
You sick for this one. Sick for this one.